Oh, verbal abuse, sexual assault, even rape by the very soldiers who are sworn to watch your back in combat. And it's not just women coming forward, but men too. And the accusers say their commanders, even the Pentagon, knew about these attacks, but just didn't do enough.
The people who commit these offenses are sexual predators who are very good at selecting their victims and tend to offend again and again, and that is a fact that is not recognized within the DoD system.
Nobody wants to say that there's been a rape in their command. Just looks bad on paper. I know for my case, even, I'm not trying to get into specifics, but people who did believe me and who had my back and were supportive of me were still telling me, don't tell anybody about this, don't go to the public.
So now these women are part of a class action lawsuit filed by more than a dozen members of the U.S. military, claiming the U.S. Defense Department mishandled their claims and they want change. The lawsuit even names Defense Secretaries Robert Gates and Donald Rumsfeld as defendants. Now listen to these numbers. Last year, more than 2,400 military women openly reported sexual assault. That doesn't include the 900 assaults filed confidentially by women, so traumatized that they were just afraid to come forward. Well, the Pentagon won't comment on the lawsuit, but Press Secretary Jeff Morrell says that the Pentagon is doing all it can. And while, quote, this is now a command priority, there is clearly still more work to do, end quote. Anu Bhagwati is consulting on the lawsuit. She's the executive director for the Service Women's Action Network. She joins us live in Washington. So Anu, this makes me think of the military suicides and how that was ignored for so long and the number just grew. Now we're talking about rape and the same type of scenario of just turning a blind eye. Why?
Right. The military has a hard time dealing with systemic institutional failures. In this case, with military rape and sexual assault, we're talking about a systemic failure to protect service members from a hostile workplace environment. As you indicated, this is a problem that affects men and women. We have two plaintiffs that are men, but men actually are under even more stress in reporting than women, in the sense that it's harder to report if you're a man, because there's so much gender stigma in the military.
Interesting. Harder for a man to come forward. Well, I mean, and how effective can a command be when you don't trust that individual standing next to you?
Right. Unfortunately, command discretion is what works in the military. It's a complete failure, though. What you have is commanders adjudicating cases in their own units between a victim and an alleged perpetrator. I mean, this is ridiculous. In the corporate world, a boss would never be adjudicating a criminal case between two employees, but that's what we have in the military. What we need is a third-party system to adjudicate all sexual assault and harassment cases. I mean, in these cases that you'll read in this complaint, I mean, they're egregious cases in which victims were both sexually harassed, sexually assaulted, physically brutalized, psychologically tortured by their perpetrators. The commanders knew about this and oftentimes ignored the case altogether, forced the victim to work alongside her or his perpetrator, to live with, to be under the supervision of their perpetrators. I mean, these are really egregious cases, and I hope the American public is outraged when they find out about this.
Yeah, well, I think that outrage has already come to the surface, and that's why we're talking about it rather on a national level. And now that it is out there and you're hearing from these women, and you're also seeing that the Pentagon won't comment on the lawsuit, that's really frustrating too. Are you confident that we will see change now that it's being talked about being talked about more on a national level?
Absolutely. If we keep the pressure on policymakers and on the Department of Defense, they can't get away with this climate anymore. I mean, we've spent millions of dollars. We've had task forces. We've had studies. We already know that this problem has reached a crisis point. What we need is policy change, and we need Congress members to step up and acknowledge that the DoD cannot handle this crisis in-house. It's time to take it outside the DoD.
Anu Bhagwati, appreciate your time again today, Anu.
Thank you.
It's an